May 8th, 1945, the heart of Europe. The smoke from burning Berlin still chokes the sky. The German Wehrmacht has collapsed. In New York and London, people are dancing in the streets. Confetti rains down like snow. They are screaming with joy because the war in Europe is finally over. The Nazi monster is dead. But 3,000 miles away, in a dusty command tent near the Czech border, one man is not celebrating. He is furious. General George S. Patton stands over a map table. He looks at the red lines marking the Soviet positions. He sees the Russian bear swallowing Eastern Europe whole. He spits on the ground. He knows something the cheering crowds do not. He knows the real war has just begun. While the world breathes a sigh of relief, Patton is making a call that will change history forever. He looks at his staff officers. His eyes are cold. He tells them to keep the tanks fueled. He tells them to keep the ammunition crates open. He says, "We are not stopping here. We are going to Moscow." This is the story of the war you never learned about in school. This is the conflict that terrified the politicians but emboldened the generals. This is the clash of the titans. But what history books fail to mention is the one decision that changed everything. The secret order that went out at midnight. The order that turned the American Third Army from liberators into the spearhead of a new, terrifying invasion. The order to ignore the surrender and keep driving east. Before we go deeper, let me ask you something. If you're holding your phone right now or watching this on your screen, have you subscribed yet? If you haven't, do it now. Subscribe to World War II Stunned. The premise was simple but insane. It was called Operation Unthinkable. In our timeline, it was just a secret plan drafted by Winston Churchill that gathered dust in a filing cabinet. It proposed rearming the defeated German soldiers and using them alongside American and British forces to push the Soviet Union back. In reality, the exhausted Allies said no, but in this timeline, the answer was yes. The United States was the richest, most powerful nation the world had ever seen. We had the industry, we had the money, we had the atomic bomb, and we had George Patton. Patton saw the Soviet army not as an ally, but as a barbarian horde. He saw their supply lines stretched thin. He saw their soldiers relying on horse-drawn carts while his men rode in steel trucks. He looked at the endless rows of American Shermans and the sky filled with American planes. He knew the United States was the only nation on earth with the wealth and the steel to finish the job. He convinced the high command that now was the only time. If they waited, Russia would rebuild. If they struck now, while the Red Army was bleeding from the fight with Hitler, the U.S. could dictate the future of the world. The order comes down the line. It is May 9th, 1945. The German soldiers currently held in prisoner camps are confused. American officers walk in. They do not carry handcuffs. They carry rifles. They hand the weapons back to the Germans. They tell them to stand up. They tell them they have a new enemy. The German soldiers look at the Americans with shock, then with a grim resolve. They turn their gaze east. They know what is coming. The American Third Army begins to move. It is a machine of pure industrial might. Thousands of trucks, jeeps, and tanks roar to life. The ground shakes. This is not a ragged army limping home. This is the rich warrior. Every soldier has fresh boots. Every tank is a full tank of gas. Every artillery piece has a mountain of shells behind it. They cross the demarcation line into the Soviet occupation zone. The Soviet guards at the checkpoints wave their flags expecting a diplomatic meeting. They are met with the thunder of a 76mm cannon. The first shot of World War III is fired near the Elbe River. An American Sherman tank blasts a T-34. The explosion shatters the fragile peace. The confusion is total. The Soviet commanders in the field cannot believe what is happening. They radio Moscow. They scream that the Americans have gone mad. They scream that the Allies have betrayed them. Stalin, sitting in the Kremlin, drops his pipe. His paranoia has come true. The capitalists have come for him. But Stalin makes a mistake. He underestimates the American logistical juggernaut. He thinks the Americans are tired. He thinks they will not fight. He is wrong. Patton pushes his columns forward with a speed that defies logic. The U.S. Army does not stop to rest. They have fresh crews rotating in. They have mobile kitchens serving hot food. They have a supply chain that stretches all the way back to Detroit. The Red Army fights back with ferocity. They are tough. They're hardened by 4 years of brutal warfare on the Eastern Front. They have numbers, millions of men, but they are poor. Their boots are worn through, their trucks are broken down American Lend-Lease vehicles, their food is scarce, and now the supply of American Spam and trucks has been cut off. The U.S. simply turns off the tap. Suddenly, the Soviet logistical spine snaps. Patton strikes at the hinge of the Soviet line in Poland. He uses the tactics he perfected in France. He unleashes his armored divisions in a massive sweeping hook. But this time, he has air superiority that is absolute. The U.S. Army Air Force fills the sky. P-51 Mustangs and P-47 Thunderbolts darken the sun. They descend on the Soviet columns like locusts. The Soviet Air Force, brave as they are, cannot match the quality of fuel or the training of American pilots. The Battle of Dresden becomes the first major engagement of the new war. Soviet tanks dig into the ruins. They wait for the Americans to come close. But the Americans do not play fair. They do not charge into the kill zones. They are the rich warriors. They stand back. They call in the artillery. They rain steel on the city for 3 days non-stop. They have more shells than the Soviets have men. They burn the resistance out with naphtha. Then and only then do the tanks roll in. The shock in Moscow is palpable. Stalin orders a massive counterattack. He throws the best of his remaining Guards divisions at the Americans. It is a clash of iron. The IS-2 tanks are heavy beasts with massive guns. They can knock out a Sherman from a mile away. For a moment, the American advance stalls. The sheer weight of Soviet metal slows the momentum. Casualties mount. American boys who thought they were going home are now dying in the mud of eastern Germany. But Patton does not panic. He smiles. He knows something the Soviets do not. He knows about the variable time fuse. It is a secret American technology, a radar fuse for artillery shells that make them explode exactly at the right height above the ground for maximum lethality. He orders his artillery to switch to these new shells. The effect is devastating. The Soviet infantry, massing for an attack, is shredded by air bursts that they cannot hide from. The attack crumbles before it even begins. The Americans push deeper. They cross into Poland. The local population is stunned. They had just been liberated by the Soviets, and now the Americans are here. But the Americans bring chocolate, they bring cigarettes, and they bring the promise that the secret police are gone. The Polish resistance rises up to join Patton. It becomes a crusade. By July 1945, the lines have shifted. The U.S. Army stands on the banks of the Vistula River, but the Red Army is gathering its strength. Stalin has emptied the gulags. He has drafted every man and boy capable of holding a rifle. He is preparing to drown the capitalist invasion in blood. Patton looks through his binoculars at the gathering storm. He lights a cigar. He turns to his aide. He says, "They have the numbers, but we have the fire. Let 'em come." The stage is set for the greatest battle in human history, the battle for Warsaw.
The summer heat of 1945 hangs heavy over the plains of Poland. The dust is thick, choking the engines of thousands of tanks. On one side of the Vistula River, the Soviet Union has amassed the largest army ever gathered in one place. 2 million men, 10,000 tanks. They are a red tide, ready to crash down on the American invaders. On the other side, General Patton and the United States Third Army. They are outnumbered 2-1, but they are not worried. They are the masters of the machine age. The battle begins at dawn. The Soviets launch a massive artillery barrage. The earth shakes for an hour. It feels like the end of the world. Then the human wave begins. Whistles blow. Hurrah! The sound of 1,000,000 voices screaming in unison rolls across the fields. The Soviet infantry charges. They run straight into the teeth of American industrial power. The United States does not fight with men alone. They fight with systems. The American commanders pick up their radios. They speak calmly. Coordinates are relayed. Miles behind the front lines, heavy artillery battalions receive the data. These are not just cannons. They are precision instruments. The American fire control centers use early computers to calculate the trajectory. The sky rips open. It is not just artillery. It is air power on a scale never seen before. The U.S. has moved its strategic bomber fleet from England to forward bases in Germany. Thousands of B-17s and B-24s, the same planes that leveled Berlin, now fly tactical missions. They are not bombing factories. They are bombing the battlefield. This is carpet bombing used as close air support. The ground in front of Patton's lines erupts. It is a wall of fire and dirt. The Soviet wave disappears into the explosion. The rich warrior spends ammunition to save blood. The Americans fire millions of dollars worth of ordnance in a single morning. To the U.S. economy, this is a rounding error. To the Soviet soldiers on the ground, it is the apocalypse. The Soviet tanks try to break through. The T-34s are fast and agile. They swarm the American positions. The Sherman tanks are outgunned, but the Americans have a new weapon, the M26 Pershing, the Tiger Tamer. These new heavy tanks have finally arrived in numbers. Their 90mm guns tear through the Soviet armor. It is a slugfest of heavy metal. Burning wrecks litter the fields. But the real difference is in the rear. A Soviet tank breaks down and it is abandoned. It stays there, rusting. An American tank breaks down and a recovery vehicle is there in 20 minutes. A mobile repair shop fixes it in an hour. It is back in the fight by noon. The U.S. treats war like a business. Efficiency is the ultimate weapon. While the ground war rages, the strategic war shifts gears. The United States Navy has entered the fight. In the Baltic Sea, American carriers launch airstrikes against Soviet ports. But the real blow comes from the Pacific. With Japan defeated or contained, the U.S. turns its full attention to Russia. The convoys of Liberty ships that once supplied the USSR now supply Patton. Stalin realizes his mistake. He thought the Americans were soft. He thought they would crumble at the first sight of mass casualties. But he forgot that this was the same nation that fought the Civil War. When pushed, the American spirit hardens, and Patton is the embodiment of that hardness. He drives his men relentlessly. He sleeps 4 hours a night. He is everywhere. He stands on the hood of his jeep, yelling, cursing, driving the army forward by sheer force of will. The battle for Warsaw ends not with a Soviet retreat, but with a collapse. The American air superiority cuts off the Soviet retreat. The bridges over the Vistula are destroyed by precision bombing. The Red Army is trapped with their backs to the river. It is a slaughter. Patton does not stop. He crosses the river on pontoon bridges built in hours by the Army Corps of Engineers. The speed is blinding. As the U.S. Army pushes into Belarus, the landscape changes. The roads disappear. It is mud and forest. This is General Mud, the defender of Russia that stopped Napoleon and Hitler. But the U.S. Army brings its own roads. They lay down miles of steel matting. They bring bulldozers. They pave the way to Moscow. However, a shadow looms over the conflict. The United States possesses the ultimate weapon, the atomic bomb. The Trinity test in New Mexico has been a success. President Truman, now fully committed to Patton's war, faces a choice. The road to Moscow is long. The Soviet resistance will only get harder as they defend their motherland. Truman authorizes the deployment of the gadget, but not on a city. He wants to send a message. He wants to show Stalin that resistance is futile. A B-29 superfortress, the Enola Gay, is diverted from the Pacific Theater. It lands in a secure airbase in France. It carries a single bomb. The target is a massive concentration of Soviet reserves near Minsk. It is a military target. The date is August 6, 1945. In our timeline, this was the day Hiroshima died. In this timeline, the sun rises twice over Belarus. The flash is seen for hundreds of miles. The mushroom cloud pierces the stratosphere. An entire Soviet army group simply ceases to exist. The shockwave flattens the forest. The heat turns the ground to glass. Patton sees the cloud from his command post 50 miles away. He takes off his helmet. For the first time in his life, he is silent. The message to Moscow is clear. Surrender or we will erase you. The rich warrior has revealed his ultimate power. We do not just have more money. We do not just have more tanks. We have the power of the sun. Panic grips the Kremlin. The Soviet generals look at the maps. They look at the reports of the super weapon. They know they cannot fight this. They beg Stalin to sue for peace. But Stalin is frozen. He cannot comprehend a weapon that destroys armies in a second. He refuses to believe it. He orders the NKVD to shoot anyone who talks about the big bomb. He orders the war to continue. He believes the Americans only have one. He is wrong.
The U.S. industrial machine is already churning out the next corps. The assembly line is moving. Operation Unthinkable has become Operation Inevitable. The U.S. forces resume the advance. They drive through the radioactive wasteland, buttoned up in their tanks. Geiger counters click madly. This is the new face of war, atomic warfare. The morale of the Red Army breaks. Soldiers start to desert. They have fought the Germans for 4 years. They cannot fight the sun. They drop their rifles. They walk towards the American lines with their hands up. They want food. They want safety. They want to escape the madman in the Kremlin. Patton accepts the surrenders, but he keeps moving. He senses the end is near. He smells the fear coming from Moscow. He pushes the Third Army to the breaking point. "Keep moving," he screams over the radio. "We sleep in the Kremlin." But as the Americans approach the Russian border, the winter begins to set in. It is early, but the air is cold. The first snowflakes fall. The ghosts of the Wehrmacht seem to whisper a warning. Do not go into the Russian winter. But Patton ignores them. He has heated suits for his men. He has antifreeze for his tanks. He believes American technology can defeat even the weather. The stage is set for the final siege, the drive to Moscow, the clash between the unstoppable force of American capitalism and the immovable object of Russian geography. The world holds its breath. Will the American eagle land on the Red Square, or will it freeze in the snow like the others before it?
September fades into October. The Russian sky turns a bruised purple. The wind begins to howl like a dying animal. The mud freezes into jagged spikes of rock-hard earth. History holds its breath. Every military strategist in the world knows what happens next. The Russian winter is undefeated. It broke the Grande Armée of Napoleon. It froze the Wehrmacht of Hitler in their summer uniforms. It is the ultimate killer. Stalin sits in his bunker and waits. He smiles. He believes the snow will do what his tanks could not. He believes the Americans, with their soft lives and chocolate bars, will wither and die when the temperature drops to 40 below. But Stalin is fighting the last war. He does not understand the American rich warrior. General Patton does not fear the cold. He attacks it. The United States industrial machine shifts gears instantly. In factories across Detroit and Chicago, the assembly lines stop making tropical gear for the Pacific. They start churning out heavy parkas, insulated boots, and portable heaters. The logistics chain of the U.S. Army performs a miracle that rivals the splitting of the atom. It is called the pipeline of heat. Thousands of cargo planes, C-47s and C-54s, create an air bridge that darkens the sky. They do not just bring bullets, they bring warmth. Every American squad tent is equipped with an oil-burning stove. Every tank engine has a heater to keep the block from cracking. The American soldier eats hot turkey and drinks hot coffee while watching the snow fall. On the other side of the line, the Soviet conscript freezes. The Soviet supply lines have been obliterated by American air power. They have no winter gear. They have no food. They huddle together in icy trenches, wrapping their feet in rags. The contrast is horrifying. It is not a war between two armies anymore. It is a war between a starving man and a well-fed machine. Patton orders the advance to continue. The tanks roll over the frozen ground. The ice actually helps them. It acts as a highway. The Third Army bypasses the Soviet strongpoints. They use the tactic of island hopping, but on land. They isolate the pockets of resistance and let the cold finish them off. It is ruthless. It is efficient. It is American. November arrives. The spires of Moscow are visible on the horizon. The city is a fortress. Stalin has turned every building into a bunker. He is ordered not one step back. He plans to turn Moscow into a meat grinder that will bleed the Americans dry. He drafts women and children to dig anti-tank ditches. He is preparing for a street-by-street apocalypse. But Patton has no intention of playing Stalin's game. He pulls up his binoculars. He sees the Kremlin. He turns to his artillery commanders. "I don't want to capture the city," he says. "I want to strangle it."
the siege of Moscow begins. But it is not a medieval siege, it is a technological suffocation. The U.S. Army surrounds the city in a ring of steel. They cut the power lines, they cut the water, they bomb the rail lines, and then they turn on the psychological warfare. Giant loudspeakers are set up on the front lines. They blast jazz music. They blast news reports of the good life in America. They blast the smell of frying bacon toward the starving Soviet lines using giant fans. It sounds ridiculous, but it is a weapon. It breaks the Soviet will to fight. Thousands of soldiers desert. They crawl across the ice at night, surrendering not to the American guns, but to the American kitchen. Inside the Kremlin, the paranoia reaches a fever pitch. Stalin executes his own generals for defeatism. The Soviet command structure begins to eat itself. They are terrified of the Americans outside, but they are more terrified of the monster inside. Then comes the critical warning, the moment that shifts the timeline irrevocably. U.S. intelligence intercepts a message. Stalin is planning a last-ditch effort. He is preparing to unleash biological weapons. Anthrax. He is willing to kill everyone in Moscow just to take the Americans with him. He demands a scorched earth that will leave nothing but a graveyard. Patton gets the intel. He calls President Truman. The line is secure. The conversation is short. "Mr. President," Patton says, "the mad dog is cornered. If we go in with bayonets, we lose 100,000 men. If we wait, he poisons the well. Give me the green light." Truman hesitates. The ghost of Hiroshima hangs over him. But he looks at the casualty projections. He looks at the map of a world dominated by American liberty versus Soviet tyranny. He gives the order. Not for another atomic bomb. That would destroy the prize. He authorizes Operation Thunderbolt. The U.S. Air Force deploys a new weapon. It is the first operational use of precision-guided munitions, primitive radio-controlled glide bombs. The target is not the city. The target is the power grid, the communications hub, and the secret police headquarters. December 24th, 1945, Christmas Eve. The sky over Moscow lights up. It is not the northern lights, it is the tracers of American night fighters clearing the air. Then the bombers arrive. They drop their payloads with surgical precision. The Lubyanka prison explodes. The radio towers crumble. The Kremlin is plunged in darkness. Inside the city, the lights go out. The heating stops. The silence is deafening. The Russian people, freezing and starving, look up at the sky. They do not see death raining down. They see pallets dropping. The Americans are dropping food crates painted with the U.S. flag. It is the ultimate power move. The rich warrior feeds the enemy civilians while starving the enemy leader. The psychological impact is instant. The Russian people realize the enemy is not the Americans. The enemy is the man in the bunker who would let them freeze. The riots begin.
The end does not come with a bang, but with a roar of anger. It is January 1, 1946, a new year, a new world. Inside Moscow, the Red Army units guarding the Kremlin turn their guns around. The coup has begun. The generals, tired of the purges, tired of the fear, tired of the freezing cold, decide they have had enough. They contact Patton's headquarters. They offer a deal, the head of Stalin for a loaf of bread. Patton accepts. The American columns start their engines. They do not fight their way into Moscow. They drive in. The U.S. Third Army enters the Soviet capital. It is a surreal sight. American Sherman tanks, covered in white whitewash, roll past St. Basil's Cathedral. The streets are lined with silent, stunned Russians. They watch the conquerors pass. They see the healthy, well-fed American soldiers in their fur-lined parkas. They see the trucks overflowing with supplies. The myth of Soviet superiority is shattered forever. The Americans secure the city. They reach the Kremlin gates. The doors are open. The Soviet guards salute the American officers. They are tired. They just want the war to be over. Patton walks into the Tsar's palace.
His boots echo on the marble floors. He carries his ivory-handled revolvers. He looks like a cowboy who has just walked into the saloon and bought the whole building. They find Stalin in his office. He is not dead. He is sitting at his desk, staring at a map of an empire that no longer exists. He looks small, frail. The man of steel has rusted. He is taken into custody without a shot fired. The image of George Patton standing over a seated, defeated Stalin becomes the most famous photograph of the 20th century. It symbolizes the total victory of the West. The aftermath is swift and absolute. The Soviet Union is dissolved. There is no East Germany. There is no Iron Curtain. There is no Cold War. The United States stands alone as the hyperpower of the world. The Pax Americana begins 45 years early. Europe is rebuilt, but it is rebuilt entirely on American terms. The Marshall Plan is not just aid, it is a purchase. The American dollar becomes the only currency that matters. English becomes the universal language of the East and West. The U.S. installs a provisional government in Russia, modeled after the American Constitution. Moscow becomes just another city in the American economic sphere. But there is a cost. The world is stable, but it is terrified. They have seen what the United States is willing to do. They saw the mushroom cloud over Minsk. They saw the ruthless efficiency of the drive to Moscow. The world realizes that the arsenal of democracy is also the most dangerous predator on the planet. Patton returns to America a hero, surpassing even Washington and Lincoln. He is the man who finished the job. He runs for president in 1948 and wins by a landslide. His presidency transforms the U.S. into a militaristic powerhouse. Space exploration begins early, driven by the military. An American walks on the moon in 1955, planting a flag that claims the heavens for the United States. However, the unknown story has a darker twist. In the archives of the Kremlin, the Americans find plans that show Stalin was weeks away from his own atomic bomb. If Patton had waited, if the politicians had hesitated, New York might have been the city burning in the winter of 1946. The aggressive, shocking decision to attack saved the U.S. from a nuclear holocaust. The aggression was necessary. The documentary ends with a panning shot of the modern world in this alternate timeline. It is a world of high-speed jets, massive American cities, and a Russia that is a quiet, democratic partner. It looks like a utopia, but the narrator's voice drops low. "We live in a world of peace," the voice says, "but it is a peace bought with the sword. We are the Romans of the modern age. We destroyed Carthage so completely that the earth was salted. We look back at history and call Patton a warmonger, but the terrifying truth is he was right. In the game of empires, you either win or you die. And in 1945, America decided to win." The screen fades to black. The text appears, "What would you have done?" This is the story of the war that almost was, the war where the rich warrior spent every penny to buy a total victory, the war of Patton versus Stalin. If this story stunned you, if it made you question what you know about history, then you need to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who thinks they know World War II. And don't forget to check the pinned comment for more shocking details we couldn't include in the video. I'll see you in the next one. Stay curious. Stay stunned.